Hey, how's it going? My name's Ray Weiss, and this is a quick video to show off Conflict Simulations LLC's first wargame, 1916, Verdun, Campaign of Attrition. This is a division scale board wargame that covers the 10-month campaign to basically bleed the French white, kill as many Frenchmen as possible, to sort of make them surrender through attrition and make them expend all of their resources. That was the German goal, while the French goal was basically just to survive. I'm going to use some terminology to explain things about the game that probably only makes sense to other wargamers, since I assume you're probably a wargamer if you're watching this. So if you don't understand anything I'm talking about, feel free to write a question in the comments and I'll give you an answer. So you have two basic unit types in the game. You have infantry and heavy artillery. Infantry can either be mobile, like on the left example here, and or entrenched on the right example. Mobile units are able to move and attack, while entrenched units, they can not move and they can't attack, but they have a zone of control. Mobile units don't have a zone of control, and that's a pretty important aspect to the game. The units have strength points and ordnance points. There's inherent artillery to the infantry units, and the movement values are just standard depending on the unit type. So the heavy artillery can be used for a number of different game things, whether you either want to just try to whittle down your opponent's strength, you want to force them to have bad die modifiers in combat. That's how you would use your artillery. And then there's a couple different auxiliary units that are specialty units that I won't get into now, but there's gas, cavalry, and engineer units that are sort of different little bits of chrome that show off how those affected the battle. Now, I'm just going to give a quick overview of how the game works and how it runs. You can find the game rules and this vassal module for free on our website, which is www.consimsltd.com. So the way the game works is the German player goes first. They get a build phase where they receive administrative points. The administrative points, I should probably take a minute to talk about this, are my main thesis and the main focused thrust of the game. A lot of Verdun games focus on tactics or at a tactical scale. You're moving around tons of different batteries and doing ranged combat. To me, it never really felt like you were dealing with the kind of problems that the administrators on the ground were dealing with. So I wanted a game that focused heavy on management and administration. So the main point and the main thrust of this game is administrative points. Now, what that means is these points over here, they sort of allow what your units can do, and they grant points during combat that you can use towards beating up your opponent, or you can use them to sort of absorb losses during combat. And the way that you decide to manage using these administrative points is going to determine how the game runs. Sorry about hearing all of that crashing in the background. You're hearing my kittens running around, and I can't do much about it while I record this. But so there's a build phase, there's an attrition phase, there's a siege artillery phase, then there's a movement phase that's pretty straightforward. It's pretty straightforward in terms of regular wargaming. After a movement phase, though, there's a non-phasing reserve movement phase, which means that if the French player had placed some of his units in reserve, which is a special mechanic, they can move those units now. Then there would be a normal combat phase, then the phasing reserve movement phase, where the German player would then move his reserve units, a supply phase, and then a unique operations phase. Now, during the operations phase is when the players can spend more administrative points on getting different phases for the different corps, and the units are color-coded by corps. So, like let's say is after, if this corps over here, which is just in this one stack, the 7th Reserve, if they just wanted to do an extra combat phase during the operations phase, they would spend 7 administrative points. And they could do that over here really quickly. So that would just shift minus down to 68. And that's how the game works. It's like, for example, you see that we talked earlier about how the infantry units have ordnance points. The way combat works is that you first determine a ratio between the artillery values of the units. So I already worked this out, and it basically works to the German side has 27. This works out to a 10 technically because it's heavy artillery and it's not being used for that. The Germans have 27 against the French 5. So let's just take a look at the artillery ratio matrix. That would mean that the German player, since it's in clear terrain, would get a modifier of +3. And the German player could also spend some on combat support, like we talked earlier. So a hurricane barrage would lower the French player's die roll modifier in combat, and or flamethrower support, or a lawn defense for the French, which is sort of like a last gasp defense. And again, the administrative points can be used to absorb losses during combat, and that's an important point to make. So that's a basic overview of how the game works. The combat results table is where the strength points are totaled up after all the other modifiers are figured out, and both players roll d6, modified by the numbers that they figure out beforehand, and then they determine which player, how many losses each player takes. All right, I think that's about, it's over 5 minutes, so I'm going to cut it there. That's the basic gist of 1916. It's $39.99, and if you don't want to buy it and just want to check it out, you can always just download the rules PDF and the Vassal module from consimsltd.com. Thanks for checking out the video. I hope you check out the game, and I hope you guys like the game. There's a nice review of it on the Board Gaming Way by Paul Combin. I'm probably butchering his name, but that's phonetic enough that you should be able to Google it, I think. All right, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section. I'm gonna try and get my cats to stop fighting, and you guys have a great night. Bye-bye.